Dark Souls 2 is an odd game to say the least. With it being a sequel to the critically acclaimed Dark Souls 1, it did have a lot to live up to, and while it did mostly get praises all around once released, the community was another story, and sorta split it into half to say the least. Nowadays though, the community tolerates the game's existence, and with the added DLC and the Scholar of the First Sin Edition being released, made sure that the game can stand on its own quite strong. But you do have those few who state that not only is Dark Souls 2 a bad Souls game, but a bad game overall, which I just disagree with, and it's laughable to see what argument they can come up with and try to prove that it is. They either make arguments that can be said about any other games in the series and act as though it doesn't happen in those games, or make claims that goes back to the train, Dark Souls 2 is bad because it's Dark Souls 2. Someone claims that the soundtrack is bad just because some of the music starts the same, even though Dark Souls 1 does it as well. And I could mind my own business and leave those few be, I just couldn't help myself when I found this video by the TheSMonoreShow, so let's talk about it. Also, I know the video is already a year old, but I do think it captures all the complaints people have with this game, and hey, better late than ever, you know? And for some clarification, I played through Scholar of the First Sin Edition, and with the gameplay he shows, I presume he did as well. Anyway, let's start.
I felt it necessary because I do believe I have something to add to this discussion, but do know I am going to go over some points you might have already heard, as this is my comprehensive opinion of the game.
Oh, we're gonna use those words later. Trust me.
Much like when going into Dark Souls 1, I did have my perceived notions of the game, but I did go into it with an open mind. However, I was immediately left with a bad taste in my mouth. One of the very first cutscenes I encountered having started the game was a group of old women telling me how hard the game was and how I'm going to lose my souls over and over. This cutscene embodies everything wrong with this game in my opinion. It's difficulty for difficulty's sake, it's not trying to be fair, it is a caricature of the series.
That's one way of looking at the cutscene at face value, I guess. The old hags, names being Strowen, Moral, and Griant, are talking about the undead curse, a big focal point of the game's lore and some characters. You're gonna die over and over since you're an undead. This is something he doesn't seem to mention at all, is the story of the game and its character. Something I believe Dark Souls 2 does pretty well. Sure, he might not care about that, and that's okay, but the cutscene holds more than, well, you're gonna die cause it's hard. Anyway, this is also the only and last time he mentions any characters or cutscene, so that's something.
This might not seem like a big issue, but when attacks and animations have a lot of wind up naturally, you imagine more weight to them. So this combination feels jarring in a way not only in feel, but looks as well. This could in part be attributed to them using mocap for this game unlike the rest of the Souls series, which never happened again, probably for good reason.
Sadly, yes. Some of the animation in this game look really cool and are improvement from Dark Souls 1, the backstab animations being an example, and they also vary for each weapon type as well. Also, casting magic has a nice feel to it. And then look at the Few Knight Greatsword in 3 compared to 2. If that's not a tragedy, I don't know what is.
Dark Souls 1 might have its issues in a few specific instances, but on the majority it's impressive how well its hitboxes are designed. Though even if we ignore the comparison to other games in the series, it's embarrassing how poor Dark Souls 2's hitboxes are at a base level. You can be completely out of visual range of an attack, and yet you can still find yourself getting hurt. This problem seems to be especially prevalent in command grab-like attacks. But these absurd disjointed hitboxes can be seen even in the most basic moves. Command grabs just look the most jarring because they actively teleport you back into the attack. In fact, a lot of times I received damage, it came as a complete shock to me. Not only because of the hitboxes, but a lot of other poor design choices.
Hitboxes can be bad, but Dark Souls 1 isn't any better, and it's kind of disingenuous when you don't even use clips from your own stream, and use others to make it seem worse than it is. At least when I say Dark Souls 1 hitboxes are worse, I use my own clips, like these. How is this a Dark Souls 2 issue? If you can handle Dark Souls and Demon Souls, then Dark Souls 2 shouldn't be a problem. I know that later he says that we should be moving forwards and not backwards, but he doesn't even bother mentioning what the game did right and fixed from the past games, like a better UI, bonfire warping, a solid frame rate, overall animation improvement, better Covenant mechanics, better PvP, and cancel a gesture mid-animation. Also, better fashion. And new additions like bonfire aesthetic, power stance, dual wielding, Covenants not just for PvP, and a way for level recollection. Why so negative? Controls can be an issue, but that isn't a reason to hate a game. An example being Dark Souls 1 itself.
Oftentimes I felt like characters wielding a sword or a spear actually had a stick in their hand, waving it around like a small child, because there was just so little weight conveyed through the weapon.
I don't like that his swipes make no sound. That's really weird. Like, it feels like it's just that there's no weight on that thing. This is bad.
I'll give him the benefit of the doubt because it is quite low, but shouldn't the animation convey that enough? Also, it's a spear. Last time I checked, spears aren't that heavy to use. And no more examples? Just that one? Okay, sure, but I won't take your word for it. Your claim is also for the player character, but you only show one example and it was towards a boss.
Now, the last thing that came to my attention over the control is the role. Perhaps one of the most affluent decisions made to Dark Souls 2 is how to navigate ADP or adaptability. Now, this pack controls a lot of things. How fast you heal, how fast you grab your shield, and how many abilities you have in a row. I think you guys see the biggest issue here. This doesn't change your role, the animation is always the same, but each one has an ability you get from it. This differs depending on how high the stat is. And trust me, it is abysmal at the beginning of the game. The game is quite decent, you played out 24 points into the stat. But this isn't great, I just think that the stat roll in Dark Souls 1 is better than its ability frame wise any starting roll in this game. With the first game, all 3 different variations of the roll can make the animation fits, but if you estimate your ability frame, then tell that your roll is 100 to 1 at rolling. While in Dark Souls 2, it can feel like guesswork, as these 3 animations still exist, depending on your weight, but their invincibility is dependent on ADP. Again, this problem can be somewhat alleviated by moving rolls into ADP, but I know I'm not the only one that thinks this is asinine. At the early points in the game, relying on rolling to attack is extremely difficult, and that's because the game is not actually balanced with the right rifles in mind. The enemy strike cycle scales to be roughly proportional to the amount of health potential that they have in later sections of the game, but enemies never really hit much faster or slower throughout the game, match the player's perceived attack ability. Even though this is properly implemented, my favorite type animation feels counterproductive, as the visuals of the animation never gave me a proper estimate of when I was invincible. I don't realize I was putting how often my roll works, not how good it was. On this game, I shouldn't cast a spell in the first 20 plus level just to get my roll to be decent. Maybe this would be somewhat acceptable if the game felt designed around it, but it really doesn't. It almost seems like they think the game and they thought, hey, we should add another stat to make the game harder, and immediately tied one of the core functions of the game to it.
Then get good, scrub. In all seriousness though, ADP still serves more than just iframe. And are we gonna forget about resistance in Dark Souls 1? If you didn't know about it, you probably wasted souls on it. Souls you can never get back. Doesn't it feel like as though it was added just to make the game feel harder than it actually is? Either way, you get a lot of souls into compared to the other games, so leveling up adaptability isn't that big of an issue no matter the build you're going for. It is bad that it's tied to iframes though, that's for sure.
And the walk up to Draglantic Castle.
Every time someone mispronounced John Lake saddens me. Oh, this isn't a point, I just fucking like the way John Lake sounds.
They come off as incredibly lazy, with little thought put forward. It's a bunch of very basic hallways and rooms where you fight dudes or run past them until you have a pack following you. That's all there is to them. No clever use of the environment or enemy placement. They teach you nothing new about the game. It's like the Dark Souls 2 developers saw the parts of Dark Souls 1 where the team ran out of money, time, and just dropped a bunch of old bosses in the tunnels. Then thought, yeah, this is where the Dark Souls experience truly peaked. These areas are trash. They are the worst part of Dark Souls 1, and they are the worst part of this game as well.
No, that's not true. In Hyda's Towers, you can find a lever only after defeating the old knights there, telling you that sometimes defeating enemies will reward you with something, and once defeating the Dragon Rider, the Hyda knights will become hostile, telling you that the world will change after an encounter. In Aldia's Keep, you can use the Pharaoh's Lockstone to activate the lights, or that pulling the lever in the room next to you will free the enemies that were locked up, and those enemies will also drop helpful items. And by lighting all the torches gives you an optional key for the area. Or you can just skip all of that and go straight ahead, only facing the 2 orcs. And the General Lake Castle run-up shows you that some statues are enemies and that killing them close to a golem will activate them, a mechanic used throughout the level. They make you check your surrounding and rewards those who will take their time as well, but quality notwithstanding. These are the areas that you mentioned, but it shows that you don't take your time to notice your surrounding, or at least that's the impression you're making.
This filler that is only here to pad out game time, without really adding anything memorable or fun to the experience at all.
I thought facing Ornstein was cool and memorable, also that Bone Dragon coming to life only to kill as well, but hey, that could be just me.
The rest of Dark Souls 2's areas do not sink this low in quality, although it appears that there was still very little variety in how they chose to approach designing them. Tunnels, dudes, dudes, with a bunch of ambushes thrown throughout to throw off first-time players.
Same can be said about any other games in the series. Go, kill, ambush, kill, rinse and repeat, boom, you're done, way to go moron. Also, the fact that I can change the clips and put from other games in this series doesn't help.
However, where they really start to lose me is how poorly thought out so many parts of the zones are. To me, it seems like a lot of recent critiques are overlooking these parts simply because they played the game so many times. Of course, now they know that using a torch to set fire to the windmill's metal wheel in Earthen Peak would reduce the amount of poison in the boss room. It's not even something they'd have to actively think about during repeat playthroughs, but it's still as nonsensical as it was the first time. In general, Dark Souls 2's world does an extremely poor job of explaining its own rules and how to interact with it. Be it something like breakable walls or pushing stones down wells, these are things that tons of people would never be able to figure out on their own without looking them up or finding a hint placed by another player.
Again, this is not a Dark Souls 2 thing. It's where the community comes into play to help each other and to give hints and tips. Even the director said that was the point of the first game. How are you supposed to know how to gain access to the DLC in 1? Or how many illusory walls were in that as well? Or that you can skip most of Blighttown with the Master Key? Or to fight the Moon Presence in Bloodborne, you needed to consume 3/3 of an umbilical cord? Or to get into Hypergean Jail was to get killed by kidnappers which only spawn once you killed an optional boss? Or where was the Undead Graves located in Dark Souls 3? Or how easy to break most questlines in 3? Or I can keep going. Some of these are needlessly complicated and sometimes you needed to learn beforehand or the hard way. But hey, maybe I'm just a gay dumb fuck, who knows? What I'm trying to get at is that Dark Souls 2 isn't the only game that does this, yet you argue as though it does.
Many of you are probably familiar with the infamously unfair ogre that one-shots the player for opening a certain door in Aldia's Keep. I've seen a few people try to defend this by saying that the ogre can be seen behind the door, but nothing in the entire game teaches you that something like this could even possibly happen.
Enemies were shown to be able to bust through some walls, like the Bane Digger in Harvest Valley and the Dark Dweller in Norman's Wharf. Pay attention.
Going by the precedent set throughout the series, the player should expect the ogre to just stand behind the door, maybe winding up a swing as it's being opened instead of just breaking through the door and instantly ending a large portion of players. But what is in my opinion the worst example of this kind of contradictory design happens in the Iron Keep. Harvest Valley, an area you go through very shortly before reaching the keep, actively goes out of its way to teach you that sometimes it's necessary to take environmental damage to get items that are laying around. But then once you're at the keep, the game punishes you for doing exactly that. There are these little cooled off lava paths right in the first room of the zone, with items laying around them, and going with what you've learned in the previous areas of this path, it's not unreasonable to assume that this game would want you to quickly run to grab the item and run off again, but no. After taking a few quick, confident steps, you will die so quickly that you'll barely have time to realize what's going on. You've now lost a portion of your health bar and your souls are stuck in the lava.
Get good!
Like you said, it's lava, or magma. Anyway, last time I checked, fire is hot. And in the clip you're shown, the first instance of lava, there's a bonfire next to you. That's a good way to show that, hey, lava kills, watch out, compared to poison, which has a bar and everything. In short, lava is lava. Poison is poisonous. Who would have thunk it? Also, swords stab people. And just because it's a fantasy game doesn't change the fact that fire is fire and poison is poison. This is also the same for Dark Souls 3, but hey, we're only talking about 2 here, I guess.
A surprise or twist can be a good thing, but only if it's built in naturally. Cases like Iron Key clearly not existing in the world visually, then magically being there feels insulting. An example of Dark Souls 2's nonsensical world design being a positive that I've seen would be the moment you enter the Dragon's Aerie, because it's like so cool and epic and you didn't see it coming at all. And while this is true, it is cool, unlike many of the subversions present in the game, that's also empty. It's a good moment in the most shallow sense. The Dragon's Aerie could have been placed anywhere at any time within Dark Souls 2, and it literally wouldn't change anything about it. Dark Souls 3 has a comparable moment when you enter Irithyll for the first time. It's a beautiful sight, and unlike the Dragon's Aerie, also manages to be geographically somewhat consistent and actually feels earned by the game. It wasn't just thrown in when someone on the team went, hey, you know what would look cool right now? It was built up with several encounters, dialogue pieces, lore bits, and yet it still manages to surprise as well as impress players. This is the difference between a carefully crafted moment and a lazy ass pull, exemplifying how pretty much all of Dark Souls 2 was put together compared to other games in the series.
Then what about Giant Lake Castle? It had a good build up with lore, and you can see it in the distance in Majula. Or what about King Vetric's Oh wait, this is Dark Souls 2. We don't talk about the good stuff the game does.
I don't see this change as a positive, like it attempts to fix a perceived flaw, but if you create several other ones in the process, then you fail. Now the second you die, the game is asking you to do everything over again. This loop doesn't feel rewarding, it feels tedious.
Then maybe don't do that? I don't know. Some boss runs are horrendous, like for the Smelter Demon and for the Executioner Chariot, and I will never try to defend them. But acting as though only Dark Souls 2 does this is purely dumb. Boss runs like for Seath and Nito are hella annoying, and thank god those bosses were easy, cause I would have not went on with the game if so. Other examples being Dark Beast Parl, Altric, Bell Gargoyles, Abyss Watchers, Osiris, and Gwyn, but there aren't in Dark Souls 2, so I guess it doesn't count. And I like the fact that you're showing the run-up for the Smelter Demon and for the Executioner Chariot like everyone else who claims the game is bad. Treating it as though it's only a Dark Souls 2 thing, yet again, is dumb.
But to that I have to ask, have you played Dark Souls 1?
I can ask the same thing for you.
This whole process is made worse by how bonfires are handled. In all other games, bonfires, or equivalents, feel like a reward after you complete an area or challenge. They're either directly in your path or spawn after a fight. For some perplexing reason, in Dark Souls 2 they decided to hide bonfires within the environment, so you're not even guaranteed to see them, sometimes even behind illusionary walls or stone statues.
Bonfires? Behind illusory walls? Where on earth have I seen that before? Also, how dare a game reward exploration? By the way, I got a question for you. Did you play Dark Souls 1? In Dark Souls 1, there are 4 bonfires behind illusory walls. The first one in Quelaag's Domain, next to the Daughter of Chaos. The second in Darkroot Basin, before Sith. The third one in Lost Izalith, before the Bed of Chaos. And the fourth one in the Tomb of Giants, somewhere before the Turning Bridge. While in Dark Souls 2, only has 3. The first one in Earthen Peak, on top of Mytha, the second one in Giant Lake Castle before Queen Nashandra, and the third one in Aldia's Keep, the one you show. This isn't even counting the areas behind illusory walls for one. Way to inflate the game's difficulty.
This means you're effectively forced to explore every area very thoroughly, instead of that being more of an optional choice. This can lead to very frustrating situations similar to what I've described earlier with bosses. If you die at any point while desperately searching for one of those hidden bonfires, guess what? You get to do this entire level all over again, with almost no shortcuts to speed things up at all.
There's only 3 hidden bonfires in illusory walls, and are these the points you think is adding to the mix? Really? life gem argument I can agree to an extent, but if you don't want to use it, then don't use it. I'm afraid it's that simple, really. The same goes for humanity. If you think it breaks the game, then don't use it. And life gems still take time to use and slowly fills up your bar. So it still fits the whole time it good thing. And again, if you don't want to use it, then don't use it. Same thing for humanity.
With life gems being a heal over time, you can perform any other action while almost passively being kept alive. Being able to deactivate your brain and face tank nearly every attack in the game by popping a bunch of gems at once trivializes fights to a ridiculous degree. It is fine if you enjoy this kind of system. I obviously can't change how anyone personally feels about it, but understand at that point, you don't enjoy fighting whatever boss you're up against, you enjoy pressing R1 a bunch of times. Lastly, and maybe most importantly, they encourage grinding in a very unhealthy way. It's the same issue I've had with humanity in Dark Souls 1, where if you felt unable to overcome any challenge in the game, you can simply kill a bunch of dudes, buy 99 gems, remove your dodge button, and tank every swing that's thrown at you in an area. It's also important to note that grinding for these is a super simple process, unlike humanity.
You don't know how someone wants to play or tell how to enjoy the game, nor do I. Don't act like a pompous twat. Again, then don't use it. It's that simple. It's like summoning. It helps you on your journey, it makes stuff easier, and at points the game encourages you. Does that mean you should use it then? Since the game encourages you? And there is a way to stop this. The agape ring from Straight.
Feeble cursed one.
God, I love him. I know it's not a solution. To be honest, it's like a small bandage to a big scar, but it's something. Even with the soul memory being a horrible system, the PvP is still a massive improvement from the past games, and it's really solid even to this day, even with the newer games and how bad soul memory is. But so far, you didn't even bother to mention any improvement the game did about the PvP or anything else. And the only one to blame is me to expect something different.
Be it the levels, bosses.
Wait, how is the Covetous Demon a disorganized boss? It doesn't come out of nowhere, and its lore is tied to the whole area and to a boss. The fight itself is a little towards the easy side, sure, but disorganized, it is not.
10 things off, I'm sure this will come as a surprise to no one, but to me Dark Souls 2 is not just a bad Souls game, it's a bad game. So many of its issues are just inexcusable when it comes to the core design. I truly feel this game has seen some resurgence in positive feedback, due to people playing it over and over again, becoming used to the bullshit design.
Or maybe they like the game. I know, hard to believe, but some have different opinions than you, and enjoy the other stuff the games give. I know, how can they?
Sure, you can argue all you want that once you know all of this info, that it improves the quality of the game. My second playthrough was more enjoyable, but it also comes back to what I said about the controls earlier. It was because I was properly equipped to understand and know its misgivings, but that doesn't make the game good. You should not be judging a game by your 20th playthrough. There is just so much hidden information that the game never teaches you.
The Dark Souls series is known for the lack of information it gives to the player. The hell are you on about?
And this would be the part of the video where I try and end it positively. I could say something like, this debate has been going on for years, clearly showing that there's no definitive answer whether Dark Souls 2 is good or not. Some people are just gonna like it, and some people won't. But, you know, some people also enjoy eating shit, so enjoy your piece of shit, guys. Don't let me stop you just because I'm right.
Whoa, so how high do you have your head up your ass then? Not only do I find the arguments to be poor and plainly put, bad, the points that do hold any merit and I do agree with have been said before, and the other points are bad at worst, or it goes back to the whole Dark Souls 2 is bad because it's Dark Souls 2 train. And the fact that the video is overly negative doesn't help it either. If people can give Dark Souls 1 a pass for its shit, so can Dark Souls 2. But hey, what do I know? My opinion is shit apparently. It's fine that you don't like the game, you have every right to. But that doesn't actually make the game bad. I'm not trying to say that Dark Souls 2 is the best or anything, or that it doesn't deserve any of its critiques, and I'm not trying to convince that it's a good game. That's only you to decide, but acting as though only Dark Souls 2 does stuff like this is dumb. Also, a lot of reviews like this talk about how bad the game is, and nothing else, not even bothering mentioning about the positives, even if it's small. It's just something I noticed. It's like me saying that Dark Souls 1 is bad because everything goes down after an Orlando, and only talking about the stuff that happens after an Orlando, like Lost Isolate and Crystal Cave. In the end, love it or hate it, Dark Souls 2 is far from a bad game, and claiming that it is just because you don't like it makes it seem as though you have nothing else to add to the conversation. My first video is done. Thank God, this took way longer than it needed to. I should have been finished so long ago, but I took my time with it to say the least. Anyway, to clarify, I do not doubt that he doesn't like the game. I'm pretty sure he does. But that ending part was the sole reason I made this video. He was just so condescending that it wasn't even a joke anymore. So that's the reason. Also, if this video gets somehow traction, which I doubt, like if it gets a lot of comments maybe, I might make a response or like a follow-up to see what happens, if maybe I change my mind, or maybe I disagree even more, who knows. But only time will tell about that. Anyway, if there's anything to critique about, please let me know, because I know I can improve upon anything. I know I can improve upon everything, and I want to hear which part I liked in. Is it the editing or the writing or the voicing? Because I know I could do a better job than this. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I hope I can do this again. God, this intro is a mess.